So in today's video, we're going to talk about progress and the weighing scales, why the scales shouldn't always be used as the main indicator of progress, and why it can often be more of a demotivation than a motivation. It should never be used on its own. You should always have other kind of methods of monitoring your progress too. So oftentimes, if you aren't someone who has a lot of weight to lose, if you are just looking to maybe tidy things up, to feel better, to just look more toned, let's say, then the scales may not change at all. You might actually look completely different, but the scales may stay the same, or in some cases it might even go up. Now, if you are someone who is looking to lose a lot of body fat, then the scales will change, but throughout your journey on the weight loss, it won't be a steady state of coming down. It will have its ups and downs. It will kind of be like a wave, and it doesn't mean that some weeks you won't make any progress. It just means that there's other things kind of playing a role, and there's a lot of things that will kind of impact how the number on the scales will portray itself. So I'm just going to talk you through some of those, and hopefully this will prevent anyone who is struggling with any emotional attachment to the scales from kind of stepping away from that. So if you are someone who feels totally consumed by it, I would say to take a step back and in some cases not weigh yourself at all. There's so many other ways we can do this. We can take progress photos, we can go off our clothes, we can just tick all the boxes that we need to tick, know that we're doing enough to see results, and then in reality, we don't really need to weigh ourselves at all. Now, I would kind of say if you aren't someone who's very emotionally attached to it, then continue on, because it can be great to see it going down over a period of time if you understand. So if you understand that it's not going to drop off daily, then it can be good to kind of keep you on track to coming to a point where it is going to go down. So we'll talk more about that as we go. So weighing yourself, understand it before you do it. So it's very important to understand all the different factors that have a part to play before you actually do it, before you put yourself in a position where it's going to just drive you off your head. So there are many variables at play which affect the number on the scales, like I said. So weight goes up and down daily unless you are a robot. So anyone who is watching this video is not a robot, so it applies to everybody. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is food, water weight, and digestion. Digestion, they obviously all play a massive role. So food type, volume, timing make a big difference. So if you have a meal later in an evening than you usually do, so let's say your dinner is usually at 8 or 7 or 8, and you end up being really busy, so you don't eat it till maybe in the nighttime. So obviously the next morning you're going to weigh more because it's going to be more food in your system. So that goes for the meal type as well. So if your meal is more carbohydrate heavy than it usually is, it doesn't mean that you're going to wake up the morning after and be heavier because you've gained fat. It just simply means that you ate more carbohydrates than normal, your body stored more water. 1 gram of carbohydrate leads to 3 to 4 grams of water weight. So if you consume 1 gram of carbohydrate, then your body will store the 2 to 3 grams of extra, or the 3 to 4 grams of extra water weight. So that means that each extra gram you eat, the more water weight you're going to have. Doesn't mean that you're going to put on weight overnight. It just simply means you have more water in your system. We're 60% water anyway as it is. So obviously, the water in our body has a lot more kind of flexibility than the fat. So the water determines a lot more really than the actual fat on a day-to-day. So fiber digestive system disturbances is another one. Obviously, if you haven't used the bathroom, then you're going to weigh more. That goes for both peeing and pooing. So obviously, if you don't pee, you have more water in your system. And if you don't go to your number 2, let's say you're constipated, then obviously I don't need to go into the gory details, you're going to weigh heavier because there's going to be more in your body. Even if you do use the bathroom, it may not have like emptied out your system altogether. So then obviously the scales is going to show that too. So sodium in processed foods. So some foods contain extra sodium, aka salt, than others. So when we eat high salt foods, then we store more water. So this is why people think that they gain weight straight away after eating a takeaway, because as you know, like takeaways such as Chinese and all those are very high in sodium. Sauces mainly have a lot of salt in them. So you are going to be heavier when you weigh in after takeaway. So that's where the whole idea comes from, that, oh, I can't even eat a takeaway without gaining 6 pounds. But basically, you've just kind of stored more water than you usually would. So I would say if you do have a takeaway or whatever it is, just give yourself a few days. It will come back to normal and then you'll know where you're at. So unless you eat the exact same food at the exact same time every single day, your weight will fluctuate. And in reality, nobody does that unless, again, you are a robot. So sleep, stress, and physical activity is the second thing I'm going to talk about. So they all play a massive role in, what the scales is going to tell you, mainly to do with, again, the water in your body. So when we have a very disrupted night's sleep, we will weigh heavier, mainly due to water retention. Again, obviously, when we're sleep deprived, our body is under stress, so we are going to retain more water than usual. Also, when we sleep, that's when we digest our food. So if you've had a very poor night's sleep, you won't have had that much digestion happening, so you're going to weigh heavier. Also, when you sleep for a very long time, you wake up very dehydrated. So if you haven't slept for a very long time, there will be less dehydrating going on. So you're not going to be, the normal weight you are, or the normal low weight you should be if you haven't slept a lot or a good quality. So anyone with kids or who gets disrupted night's sleep this will be very much important for them. So stress is also another one. When we're stressed, we retain water. So I would say if you're going through any kind of crisis, if you're more stressed than you usually will be, just to avoid weighing yourself altogether. And that's just creating the boundary around the scale. So you know yourself, if you're very stressed, if you've had a very poor night's sleep, create that boundary. Don't bother putting yourself in the position to be disappointed. Going back to the point not to be emotionally attached to the scales, because there are just so many things that can affect it. So then we're going to go on to the false perception of a realistic weight loss. So a lot of the time people are kind of under the illusion that if they follow something to a T, if they're very precise, if they do everything they should, they will see a number dropping automatically on the scales, but it just isn't the case. So you might be making a lot of progress, you might be doing everything you're asked to do, but the number will stay the same, or it might even, go up and down a lot. And that's just, again, going back to the points we discussed previously. So the false expectation comes from all these like carb-free diets and juice diets and all those kind of unsustainable diets where you will drop off a lot of water weight very quickly. So they work very fast. But in reality, when you kind of resume eating normally again, the weight will just creep back on. And if you have lost some fat, it usually goes on and more. So they're just very unsustainable. It's not a realistic kind of life change or lifestyle change you should be looking to do, because unless you want to have a really regimental, miserable kind of existence, then I would say to avoid all those methods. Even if you're going to get a quick fix, it's not worth it in the long run. So then, to retain your muscle mass, to have like healthy bodies and organs, we need to kind of do this appropriately and in a healthy manner, that if there is a lot of weight to be lost, it will be done in a steady and healthy way. So again, be consistent and patient with it, and it takes time to show. So even if you are losing fat, on a week where you're being, ticking all your boxes, it will still go up and down like a wave. It could go from like 0.5 to 0.8, back to 0.3, and all the way up again. And then eventually it will just drop off and you notice it stays down. And then you're kind of, right, I have lost fat. What I've been doing is working. But it just takes time to kind of get to that place where it steadily kind of drops off and shows. Again, that's just when everything regulates out and your water, any water retention has diminished or whatever it is. So the body is made up of more than fat, so over half water. So you need to have huge consideration for that. So we're just going to move on to alcohol then, which definitely deserves a mention. Alcohol is a funny one because you might go on a night out and wake up the following morning and be like 4 or 5 pounds lighter, and that's purely because you're dehydrated. All the water has been sucked out of you, and then you might wake up the following morning and then you could be up like 6 pounds, and that's purely because of the carbohydrate in the drink that you were drinking. So again, you're going to store water. So when you're dehydrated, that's when the water can kind of retain. So it's just something to be mindful of. Alcohol will play havoc with your weighing scales, so don't rely on the weighing scales too much if you had a night out. I would say give yourself a couple of days after drinking to weigh yourself, just to make sure everything is regulated out. You don't want to weigh yourself if you know it's going to be inaccurate anyway. So to avoid any mental tortures, then stay away from the scales after you've had a couple of drinks. So for women, the menstrual cycle plays havoc. It's probably one of the main things. So it's last but not least I'm going to talk about. So we all know the days leading up to our periods, we could be about 6 pounds heavier than we usually are, and that is just purely the changes in hormones leads to water retention. There's so many factors. So when we get bloated, we're going to be heavier. We tend to eat more, so we go for our chocolate and stuff like that. So obviously then we're going to weigh heavier on the scales. It doesn't mean you've gained loads and loads of weight around your period. It just simply means that you have more water in your body, your hormones are up and down, and there's a lot going on. So realistically, I would say to avoid using the scales as a measure of progress around this time, and just to avoid getting upset or disappointed and thinking that you've gone 10 steps backwards just because you had some ice cream and chocolate. Unless you're doing those kind of things over and over and over again, then it's not going to cause a whole pile of fat gain. So take home message, meal type and food timing. As I said, certain foods make you retain more water than others. Simply put, the amount of sleep and quality. So as I said, when we're sleep deprived, our bodies are under pressure, so we'll retain more water, and also there'll be less digestion happening because you haven't had the good night's sleep that you should have, and you're going to weigh heavier than what you expected. Stress levels, another huge one. When we're stressed, we retain water because our body is in fight or flight, and it's just the way it is. Illness is another one I didn't talk about too much, but it also plays a huge role. If we're sick, obviously our bodies are under pressure as well, so we're going to retain more water. Poor digestion, I don't need to go into the details. Being constipated or not emptying your bowels like you wanted to or whatever it is, then you will obviously weigh more. Water intake, if you have an extra litre of water, you're going to weigh heavier. So that is why I think the likes of Slimming World and Weight Watchers is kind of almost torturous when you have those weigh-ins that determine how you did, like either you did good or bad kind of thing, because there's just so many reasons why you may have not come down, or you may have stayed the same or gone up in some cases. So I think it's desperate when people put all their eggs in one basket and then they get the pat on the back when they go down, and then they get told they need to do better next time when they don't. And I think that it's just hugely unfair to put anyone's kind of hope into a number changing. Menstrual cycle, like I said, all the hormones going up and down has a huge part to play. So before you step on the scales with your mood depending on it, take a second. Remember all these points, do yourself a favour and believe in this information. So anytime you feel yourself getting emotionally attached, just kind of remind yourself of all the things that have a part to play. It's a very slippery slope if you are getting emotionally attached to a number on the scales, and if you're really depending on it to make you happy, or to make you sad, because it's very much a thing that goes up and down and it's just so unpredictable. So you don't want to be putting all your hope into it. So that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you found it beneficial, and just have a scroll through anytime you feel that you're kind of going down that road of being attached to the number on the scales. Thank you for listening, and I will catch you next time.